everybody. Welcome back to the show. My name is Nick. This is Alex and Noah. This week we have a very awesome interview for you guys on It Came from Screambox. Welcome, everybody. We have Matt Manjourides on the show this week. We are very excited to talk to him about everything that we hold near and dear, which is horror, movies, pop culture, and what it takes to actually be a part of that realm of creation. So, Matt, could you please introduce yourself to the audience? Tell them who you are, what you do, and what you're about.
Yeah, I'm Matt Manjourides. I work on a couple of different shows right now. I'm a producer on The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs. We just produced the new Streettrash. It's on Screambox. Um, we do about 3 or 4 movies a year. And started working at video stores in high school. Started, and then when I moved to the New York, New Jersey area, started Trauma in 2000. Was it 2006 maybe? And then from there went on to start doing my own stuff with my partner Justin Martell, and we been sort of working at it ever since.
Now, that's not the funeral home, correct?
Yes.
Now,
Yeah.
what exactly is the story with not the funeral home? I know Lucy put it in the notes. There you go, Lucy. But I want to hear it from you. How did this start, and what really made you want to create this?
So while we were working on Return to Nukem High, Volume 1, up in Buffalo, New York, our production office slash housing for everybody was a old funeral home that we had, and it was a very spooky place, at least the first time. And then after Trauma, we ended up producing another film up in Buffalo, and used basically a lot of the same local connects, including that funeral home as a production office. And after that movie, we decided anything we do from then on, even if it's up in Buffalo area, we're not going to be staying in this funeral home anymore. So we formed the company, not the funeral home, to know that we're not staying in the funeral home for any of these productions.
Was it something about that? Like, you said it was spooky, but was it just one of those things where it's I don't want to do this.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was. So the funeral home was owned by a big mobster from from Prohibition era, his family all the way up until the 60s and 70s, and apparently there was potential. He was he was a mortician there, and locals would say they would used to bury 2 people in a box, because he would either bring the bodies there or do whatever, and then get rid of them by basically doubling up the coffins that would normally run through there. And so the place was itself obviously had an air to it. Most of the building's actually underground, so it's like there's a first level with the chapels, and then all the offices and main rooms and everything are actually underground. So you're basically living in like this basement of a funeral home. And people had the first batch of people that were there, like the landing crew for the production, all had sort of weird experiences while they're alone, or just 1 or 2 people there. And so we didn't have that much the second time around, but it would still not. It's still one of those places where if you're the only one there for some reason, you hear things or you see things or something. So we were. Plus, it was just a miserable place. I mean, it was just there was no air condition, and upstate New York gets extremely hot in the summertime and extremely cold in the wintertime. So there's no heat, there's no air condition, there's no proper, bathrooms or bedroom. There's like 1 shower that we had for like 50 people. It was not it served its purpose, but was not a stable place for like an actual, well-run production.
So
do you think you'd ever go back there to make if you were doing like a paranormal or a ghost flick, do you think you'd ever use that location?
would be a good it would be a good it could be a good location. It would not be a good place that would be like, we're gonna work out of this and live here at the same time type of situation.
You would not catch me. You would not catch me staying in a funeral home. I show up and be like, you guys have fun. I'm gonna go to the Motel 6 down the road.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not gonna get possessed tonight.
I've seen this movie.
exactly.
That's my thought. I go there. I'm like, you know what? I've seen this because like
Yeah.
when we did something similar when I was in a band, we recorded in an old funeral home, and there was just something about that album that we wrote. I was like, this sounds not like good at all. Like it sounded cool, but I was like, something about this, like we were like in some fucked up headspaces. But no, I mean it's cool to see like where everything starts from, right? Like you get your foot in, you're doing cool stuff with the legendary Trauma, obviously, right? And it's like this funeral home then jumps off to you going, not again. We're doing our own thing now. It's always
Yeah, I
interesting
mean
to see
that's
that.
kind of it's yeah. I mean, as on that level, it's still that we're not we're now doing our own thing. So we're now beyond. We did a couple of movies with Tromo. Did produced Father's Day, produced Return to Nukem High. Justin stayed on, did Return to Nukem High Volume 2, or not stayed on, but came back to help produce that. I think he also produced Shakespeare's Shitstorm. Like he came back to help Lloyd
Wow.
out with that. So now we've sort of now said we really want to do our own stuff, and we did one of the first things we did is the 2019 Castle Freak for Fangoria, and we did Subspecies 5. We're sort of specializing. We're trying to figure out like what angle can we do. There's 1,000 independent producers out there. There's 1,000 people that can work a system in upstate New York or work a system in Atlanta or Texas, whatever. We were like, what can we bring to the table? And it turned out that we could, through my partner's other company, which is like an extreme tourism company, we made a lot of connections around the world, and we were able to use those connections to pivot into filmmaking and locations and getting crazy places that most people don't film. A lot of the stuff that people go to is like Romania, Bulgaria. We were like, well, what's the one over? What's the country that's coming up and wants to do it? We can still get all the same gear, same equipment. A lot of the crew is experienced because they shoot like commercials out there still, but they're not really like doing major features. So we shot Castle Freak in Albania, which we were the first feature American, definitely horror movie, but maybe full feature American movie to shoot in Albania.
Right.
And that was, a crazy experience, obviously. Still some bugs to work out, shooting a full big production in Albania, but we decided to move over to Serbia, which we've shot, I think, about 5 or 6 movies in Serbia so far. There's a good fit over there. But, yeah.
Do you when you're shooting, because it sounds like you've done a little bit in the States versus over there, which do you think there's like, do you find like a lot of big differences between shooting in the US and shooting overseas?
Yeah, there's huge differences. The biggest thing that we find that works for us is, obviously if the project fits for shooting outside the US, and let's make it fit. Let's make the project a non-US project. So rather than saying, like, we had a project, we did Puppet Man for Shudder, and initially we were like, we're going to shoot this in Serbia, but it's like it's an American story about kids in a college town, horror movie, and that you don't get that outside of America. So rather than fake it where people are going to watch it and be like, that's not Buffalo, that's not New York State type of thing. That's obviously a weird European building. We were like, let's just shoot it upstate New York, and we got full access to University of Buffalo and everything. It was great. But we tell the if someone comes to us with a project, we're just like, if you want to shoot it in Europe because of the price, because we can the reason why the price works is because we do all local crew. We're not going to fly out 20 people. We're going to use local camera crew. We're going to use local gaffers and grips and everything. We're not going to fly out all your heads because that's not not part. That's not going to save you any money. Then you're going to have communication problems, and you're going to have work relationship problems that are going to slow things down. So we're like, you're going to bring out a director, actors, and that's it. Everybody else is going to be local. Then the story should change for the setting. So we're going to change the story, so it's going to be in Europe. We're going to change the story. It could be a bunch of different European cities, but it's got to be European because that's what the look of the locations are going to be. So I mean, we shot a movie that in the same city that the new Hellraiser was shot. They shot it for Boston, and that's not Boston any stretch of the imagination. We shot it for Belgrade because that's where it was, and so we used the same. They used our locations, the same, the libraries we shot at, everything, and it's just like it looks kind of weird. There's no place in America that looks like that, but we make it work, and it attracts a lot of producers who are like, we only have a small budget, because everything has a small budget now, because it only took 10 years for people to realize you can't make any money off of streaming. So everybody has cut their budgets on everything. Yeah. So you need to be able to say like, yeah, we can do this project for you, but got to be some changes, and we can shoot it in somewhere else.
So when you're like working on a project, have you ever had it be like where you had an idea of what you thought it was going to be, but then when you got to the location, things might have changed in your ideas to fit that location like you mentioned?
Yeah, it happens all the time, and I think no matter what, that's that's filmmaking. Unless you have all the money in the world to throw at the problem, money solves all the problems with filmmaking for the most part. So, but if you go there and it could be just you show up, and for some reason the location's not locked, or you're not. We've gone to locations. We've done, even in America. They give us a full walkthrough. They tell us, oh, we can use anything we want. We can go here. We can go there. We can do this. And when the day comes, all of a sudden it's like, you can't really use this. Oh, we didn't get permission for this. So we've had to pivot. And that's just the thing. I mean, you move. Worst case scenario, you have to find something else to shoot that day, and then move that location, shoot to a different day. Or, I mean, we shot Puppet Man the dead of winter in Buffalo, and we were supposed to have access to a certain area, and we couldn't, for whatever reason, couldn't get it. So we actually had to move that, and ended up having to shoot that scene on like the rooftop of a hospital, like 30 minutes away, or like a couple of days later or something. So, it's all, it's just trying to find solutions. I mean, the filmmaking is always about, problem solving. I mean, that's basically everything's a problem. You just have to try to figure it out.
Kind of sounds like that's what being a producer is. Well, like that's like, if I don't know what it takes to be a producer, right? So if you could like walk me through that, because it sounds like you're constantly putting out fires. That's what it sounds like.
Based on your level of involvement as a producer, which obviously there's varying tiers of involvement for a producer, and if you're involved from A to Z in a production, then you're trying to solve everything from obviously just trying to get the financing for the movie together, trying to get the people attached, whether it's a director, or even just trying to get the script written if you have an idea, actors, trying to get it to a studio, trying to get it to financier, then you move on to casting, and then you move on to locations, and then you move on to putting a crew together, and then once all of that is done, it's then you get there and find out who couldn't make it for whatever reason, trying to replace other people, or something didn't work out, or schedule conflicts or something. And then keeping everybody fed, keeping everybody on time, making sure they can show up there, putting them up in housing, and 50 things, 100 things down the line is just making sure you can get your day done that you need to, because you only have enough money to shoot 18 days or something like that. And you eventually, maybe on the 15th day, you got to start tearing pages out of a script, and just to make sure you get the important stuff. And then once all that's done, then you have to be like, all right, now we actually have to deliver this movie. You have to edit it and make the sound and do everything. So, you know, and a producer who's involved all the way through the beginning has to sit with it and solve of all the problems that are everything from just mediating personal issues between crew or actors or other producers or directors or whatever, to studios and personalities in the studios and distributors and financiers, and then there's the day-to-day problems of just like organizing everybody in logistics and whatnot. And then there's the money issues with making sure that you have enough money for everything and you don't overspend, or you have enough on the side in case something goes wrong, contingency. And it's really a lot of various levels of management, micromanaging all the way to sort of trying to get the best people so you don't have to deal with all the smaller details, and just get the broader scope of things as long as it gets done. And yeah, I mean, and then there's other projects we have where we're just like, we'll try to help you on certain issues, and then read a script, and then they'll go out and do it, and then we'll maybe try to help them sell it or something like that. And that's our involvement on that. So it really depends on what level of involvement that you have with the project, how close the project is to you. I mean, we have projects that we've done from the ground up, based on our an idea we've had, and then it's all of a sudden it's made into a movie 2 years later, to people that are like, here's a script, here's the director, here's the actors, we just need you to go out and make sure it's shot in focus in and then delivered to us in like a month or something like that.
It sounds like
So
it's a way more intensive role than people would think of. Because I know
it
I've always
it,
had the
it is.
misconception that a producer is just like one of the people that the money guy, like they're supplying the money to get this
There's
thing
that level.
made.
Well, yeah, there's that level of producer. There's the executive producers, which are usually like the studio guys that you deal with, that you know greenlight the movie. They make the deal with you at the studio, and they help finance it. There's also executive producers who are people that just gave you the money. They come in as financiers, they get executive producer credit. So there's various, like I said, various levels of involvement for producers. I mean, we've had producers that will just come to set for a couple days, but they've also done things maybe behind the scenes or something that is a little more necessary for the production to happen. But they're not going to be there day to day dealing with, like, making sure everybody's fed, or things like that. So it really depends. You need a good balance. You need at least one good person that is like on the ground every day problem solving,
Right.
in order to make something happen. And then from there you can have sort of a someone that's just thinking of the big picture of like, okay, I got the money, movie's happening, what's the next step after that? So it's good to have a couple of different levels of people that are not all bogged down with, like, where's the hot coffee, but you do need somebody who's worrying about where the hot coffee is.
Right.
Coffee on set, you're gonna have a lot of crabby people, man. I can't live without
Yeah.
it. Speaking of like producing something, getting something lifted back off the ground and just back up, The Last Drive-In.
Yeah.
How I remember watching Joe Bob Briggs on TNT with my uncle Keith when I was 33 now, so I had to have been 8, maybe 8 years old, maybe, watching Joe Bob on TV. Like introduce the movies. You know, it was an awesome ride. Joe Bob Briggs in The Last Drive-In was an awesome ride. How did you and your team, like, how did this come back to? Because in this day and age,
Yeah.
people didn't realize how important it was, and it was only supposed to be one, like a special, was it not?
Well, so I grew up with Joe Bob way back from movie channel days. I remember watching, drive-in theater and Joe Bob's Drive-In on the movie channel. That's where I got introduced to him, and then followed him through all the different iterations. Um, when I was working at Troma, I reached out to Joe Bob through his website, and this was probably like 2007 or something like that. And he had been out for a couple of years, obviously by that time. He was writing full time novels. He did a book about Motorola satellites and whatnot. And I had reached out to him, and he wrote me back. I took him out to lunch in the village, and we were talking about maybe it was something we could do. Primarily it was like Troma stuff, like you can introduce Troma movies. And I brought the idea. I brought the idea to Lloyd and Michael at Troma, and they were just like, they weren't into it for whatever reason. And I was like, all right, whatever. And I just had it in my back pocket for the next, like 10 years or so. And I got a project. I left Troma, working on our own stuff. I had gotten a project into Fantasia Film Festival's Frontiers program, which is sort of a picture program, at the festivals. They have it at Cannes, they have it at Fantasia, where they choose like 20 projects or something, and you go to the film festival, and to a room of distributors and financiers, you get to pitch your project to them and see if anybody wants to like jump aboard or something like that. It was actually George Romero's last project. So it was called Road to the Dead. We were working on it with George for like a year, and I think 5 days or something before the Fantasia, he passed away.
Oh man!
And he recorded something for us that we played and everything. So I was up there. We were pitching the project, and we were actually had some people on board for sales and whatnot. And I met some guys from Shudder. I think it was like maybe a year old at the time or something like that. And I just pitched them a couple projects, and two of them really took off. And one of them, I just was like, "What about bringing Joe Bob back?" In some sort of like Joe Bob's Drive-In show, and they liked that, and they liked this other project that we were talking about, and which coincidentally was actually supposed to be a heavy metal series before Love and Robots came out. And they liked both of those, and we were further in heavy metal deal than we were with the Joe Bob deal. And then the heavy metal deal fell through, and then we started doing Joe Bob. And I think between signing like agreement to do I think they just wanted like 2 movies or something like that. And Joe Bob was actually like, if we're gonna do it, this might be the last one. Let's do like dusk till dawn till dusk marathon. And so we landed on 13 titles, and then Shudder called us, I think, a month out from shooting or 2 months out for shooting or something. We're like, we want to pull the plug on it. The president at the time wanted to pull the plug on it, but I've set aside like pennies from like a PR fund that they didn't spend. We can give you that to shoot this like promo, this pilot of like whatever. And we were like, are we still going to do 13 movies? We have zero money basically. And we decided we're just going to go through it. I called in a lot of favors. I knew the people that own the studios that they shoot like Ink Master in. We went there. They shoot in Newark. We went there to the studios. We had 2 days, like a weekend, that they weren't shooting Ink Master. They have like these little black box rooms where they do like their like talking head interviews. So we built one of those out to be the Joe Bob's den. Stole we used a bunch of lights from Ink Master. We had called in every favor we could for camera rentals and everything, and had everybody working for free basically. Um, for at least lunch. We paid some people, but the close knit crew was all doing it out of love of it. And we shot in 2 days. We shot the that marathon, the 13 movie marathon, and
Wow.
yeah, it was crazy. And then we literally hired rented like a van and threw all the sets into it, and then just like dumped everything in a dumpster because we didn't know what the hell was going
What?
to happen. And then
Real
Oh,
guerrilla filmmaking there.
yeah, and then you know I think I don't know when we shot it, maybe February or something, and it came out in July. Um, crashed the AMC server soon, and we knew like, oh wow, this is something we knew people wanted to see it. We knew people would want it. We didn't realize, how bad people were missing it. So they crashed the server, and I think the next day they sent us they were like, we want you to do like a whole season.
we're sorry.
Did the president call you back? Did the president call you back like, just kidding, here's a big budget?
It was a test.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
'Cause
So
now you're like, now I got the whip hand. I got the success here. You're coming back to me. You're crawling back.
yeah, no, it was really nice to see that, something that you really, a lot of people put their time and effort into. I mean, Austin, our director, a lot of the core crew that were involved with that marathon are still with us 7 seasons in. So
That's that's so crazy. Like I said, Joe Bob is one of those things, man, that was important to horror movies. It's important
yeah,
to movies and television in general. It's just a cool thing that anybody can get into. I watch Joe Bob on Shutter whenever I'm able to. Right, like when it first came out, I remember always tuning in. Also before I had a child, so I'd always just get drunk on a Friday, Saturday to be like, all right, Joe Bob time. My buddy Nick, dude, my other friend Nick, he has a couple movies of his own. He watches things like he'll watch Joe Bob and he'll watch other things and like he'll write notes the entire night. I watched it with them once. I was like, I'm not watching this with you. I can't because you sitting there going like just writing things out. I'm like, dude, I'm not doing it.
Hmm.
But it's awesome to hear how something as special as Joe Bob was came back and became even bigger and more special. You go on
I
Twitter, you
think
type in Last Drive-In, it's everywhere.
yeah, I mean, the thing about, I mean, obviously, the drive-in and Joe Bob had a big fan base, and the fan base had grown up with him, as he was around since the mid '80s on Movie Channel. So you have like at least two generations that got to experience Joe Bob on like linear television. Um, but he hadn't been on since you know he hadn't been on before social media. I mean, since social media started. So when he came back, it was the first time his fans were able to sort of interact with social media, and then he was able to interact, and obviously, Darcy the Mail Girl, and
Oh,
so that helped really build the resolve of the community, because it was the reason why we haven't had a drop off in viewership because of our fan base is so strong, and that the interaction. I mean, every time the show airs, we're top 5 trending on Twitter, because the interaction is so strong. I mean, there's obviously like Discords, and there's Twitch, and there's Facebook groups, and they have watch parties online and whatnot. So the interaction, and then you get to jump on and just see all the comments about who hates the movie that we chose, or who loves the movie that we chose, and who agrees with Joe Bob, who doesn't agree with Joe Bob, and just the back and forth of it is what a lot of people look forward to, is just being involved on that discussion level, and then the replay value of our episodes too is stronger than premieres of some of the other shows. I mean, if we saw a list of like the most viewed things on Shutter, and then you know our show is up there, but then like three of our old episodes are higher than like the newest stuff that's coming out.
Right.
Because they just keep going back and rewatching them. I mean, where else is like Kings or Sledgehammer going to trend on Twitter?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude. It's
Well, that's
crazy.
great. I mean, gives like you might not otherwise find stuff like that, and then it's like it introduces that to so many more people than would have found it on their own. And
Yeah, I
then
mean,
like
that's
you
the
were mentioning the community aspect of it, like that. I can only imagine what the like Discord watch parties are like. That like it's like a perfect platform for stuff like that.
yeah. And the trick we always have with choosing the titles is, the balance of introducing something new to the fans, or, to most of the fans, versus fan favorites, versus, do we want to, break out, fan favorites are 70s and 80s movies, those are the movies that they grew up with, obviously, in this era. That's what they want to see. But there's also, do we try to find new gems to introduce them to? Do we try to talk about something that's in the zeitgeist? Do we one of the reasons why we do, like, uh what is it called, the killer one with the nature walk, in a violent nature.
Okay, yeah.
you
Oh
know
yeah.
so, like, it's one of those things that was a lot of people were talking about it. It was in the air, people were discussing. So it's like, let's talk about it. And, it's not going to be slasher movie the fans want to see, in a sense, but and they've probably seen it because it's new and it's out there and it got a lot of press. Let's see what Joe Bob has to say about it later. Let's dissect the slasher, and which is one of the things that we do when we do something that's like newer and that it's popular. Let's talk about the origins of it. When we do, a lot of fans are like, why are we doing, like, an episode of The Walking Dead spinoff or something like that? Part of that is like, it's something we haven't done before. It's in the popular culture. I mean, it revolutionized sort of the dead, in the pop culture. I mean, nothing else has had a greater effect on, quote unquote zombies in pop culture than The Walking Dead, at this point, for this generation.
Right.
But we're now able to talk about the evolution of it. Let's talk about the breakdown. Let's had Greg Nicotero on, and we were like, can you bring, sculpts of, like, Night of the Living Dead, makeup, Dawn of the Dead makeup, a Day of the Dead makeup, and then, Walking Dead makeup. Let's talk about the evolution of the Living Dead look, which is interesting. That's what we think fans want to talk about, even if we have to watch, an episode of Walking Dead to talk about it. That's the catalyst to have these discussions. So, that's what we try to do. Like, what is the discussion around the title is as important as, the title itself, because it's everybody's seen these movies. I mean, how many times, can you see, the first Halloween? You know everything about it. You know every angle. You know every shot. You know everything. Let's talk about all that stuff too. Let's do a deep dive into it. That's the point. So, that's definitely one of the things that goes into it. And then obviously we want to pair it with something that's like, if we're going to do a big discussion on the history of cannibalism in England, maybe let's make the second movie something that's like just a fun, romp of effects and whatnot.
Yeah.
If we're going to do a black and white 1920s horror film that's important to talk about because it's a classic and it gave birth to modern horror, maybe the second movie should be something that's a little more easy to digest.
It's cool to see, like, what goes into conversation behind this, right? Because, like, you could just literally have Joe Bob sitting there going, and this is the movie. You could, and people still watch it, but doing it this way,
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
the audience feels like they're a part of the show. That's immediately what drug me back into Joe Bob as an adult. I was like, I feel like I'm being talked to by Joe Bob, not at to. I'm like, oh, he's like talking to me. Well, crazy. Like, it's all the shit like I want to learn about while watching a show and just having a genuinely good time. You know, and Darcy's awesome as always. Obviously a fan favorite. Darcy rules. But it's just cool to see, man. It's cool to see that this generation is now understanding, like, all right, this makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
let's do this. Like
And
this.
what's interesting and obviously even a little divisive in some of the circles, especially with the older fans. Um, a lot of them came to know Joe Bob in like the late '80s, early '90s Joe Bob. So you're getting like a married with children comedy to it. You're getting the scantily clad male girl. You're getting the non PC for now for this generation, the un PC jokes. You're getting all kinds of stuff, and fans. It was great. It was that time capsule of stuff is hilarious. It's like watching Married with Children now. It's like that as un PC as it is now, it was hilarious then.
Right.
And now obviously we do get some notes and everything about certain things that can and cannot be said from AMC, but it's now taken on a more academic approach than just sort of the the joke stuff that it used to be. And the fact that he has no time limit on an episode anymore. He used to have a 2-minute bracket between commercials that he could do on TNT or something in 90 seconds or something like that. Now there is no. I mean, we've done over an hour intro for some movies, and it become a 4 or 5 hour episode with 2 movies, and it's just every break is 20 minutes, and there's a lot of information, and of course we still do the gags, we still do some of the funny stuff and the music videos and stuff like that. But it's much more. It's all catered around what is the academic takeaway from this.
That's incredible.
Sounds awesome. It sounds like getting in with the new streaming platform really gave you a opportunity to really like stretch out and maybe like take a little more time than you would have been able to.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely. I mean, if you watch the marathon, we were still like 5-minute breaks, or so. Like, it's quick. I mean, obviously we had a lot to get through in 2 days. We couldn't do a big slog of breaks. But if you watch the early shows, they're tighter, they're shorter, and now it's it's expected to be a 3-4 hour block of Joe Bob on Friday nights, because there's a lot that he's writing, there's a lot that he wants to say about certain things, and he wants to break down the history of certain things, and he wants to go into the deep dive, and the guest conversations are longer and more in depth, and that's, if we're going to give the fans something to watch, let's actually talk about it.
Now, before we get off Joe Bob, the charity event that's raised over for $500,000 at this point, right? How did that charity event come about? That's awesome.
It was Joe Bob's idea. He was, we were talking about what specials we want to do, like a Halloween special, a Thanksgiving special, a New Year's special, and we ended up landing on the Halloween special. We did a Thanksgiving special, I think 1 or 2 seasons, but then that sort of just rolled over into, let's do this Christmas special. And obviously, we were thinking like, what can we do to make, Christmas special.
Yeah.
And Joe Bob was just like, I have a lot of stuff in storage, and we could auction off various things, and it just sort of steamrolled from there. I mean, it was a huge hit right from the beginning. We raised a ton of money the first time we did it, and now when we have guests on or something, we always want to say like, hey, do you have anything you want to put in for this this auction? And Joe Bob chooses like 4 or 5 different charities he wants to support, and we team up with Fright Rags, who always puts out some special gifts and things like that, and we end up raising like a ton of money.
See, the horror community is a lot more than just gore and boobs, and
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's only so much value in like a Joe Bob Bolo. So we know that when people are bidding like $10,000 on it, they know it's going towards a charity, which is good. So,
I wonder what the shock from Joe Bob was when he's like, "The fuck are they doing? Put it like it's probably cool. Like, cool, the charity's doing good, but damn, like I would have been like,
no, there have been some definite shockers where we're just like, wow, that somebody really really wants that thing.
Yeah, I'd be lying if I'm not one of those guys who like see something. It's like I gotta have that. I gotta have that. There's like
that is absolutely you. You're the like absolutely like I gotta have this little obscure piece of
some
Joe
dude,
Bob history.
souvenir. Yeah.
Some dude said he had a piece of the Necronomicon original page from the Evil Dead, and I'm a big Evil Dead fan. I have Ash tattooed on my arm. I love the Evil Dead, and my buddy walks over and goes, "Is this bullshit right here?" He's like, "This is not."
I think recently there was like either 3 or 6 original sketches from the Necronomicon that came up for auction somewhere.
You're gonna feed this man's addiction.
He
is furiously searching eBay.
I'm not doing that. I already.
Oh, these are like this is like movie auction websites.
Like Sam Raimi's personal collection. Like I'm not doing.
I think it came out of the collection of the artists who did it, and someone put them up. So
I knew a guy who, when I think the original house was filmed. That was in Tennessee. No, yeah. I think the original house is like
either Tennessee or Virginia or something.
I think it was Tennessee because my buddy moved to Tennessee. He was like, "Hey, like, I live right. The Evil Dead house is like right behind me." I'm like, "No, it's not." Takes a picture. You're like, it was like blocked. You weren't supposed to go there, but I didn't know that. Like for a long time, I was like, "Oh, that's just like a set." Evil Dead 2 was a set, or like it was in a gym. Anyways, I digress. We'll get to that after the show.
I imagine they'd have to build a fence around it, like the Breaking Bad house.
It got demolished.
I think it burned down or something.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah, it got something stupid happened to the Evil Dead house. Good luck, you just unleashed all that bullshit into the world. So I wanted to circle back to Trauma. Obviously, big Trauma fans here. I'm
you just did a Toxic Avenger episode or something, didn't you?
We are going to be doing one for the new movie, and I just got the Peter Dinklage Toxie tattooed on my arm because I'm a sucker for just doing things impulsively. But I love the Toxic Avenger. I grew up with it. Uncle Lloyd is someone I've always liked to like dissect what he's thinking. He's a very interesting person to me. I love when I met him at a con. He would just rub my head and called me Naughty Nick, and then signed it on a piece of on the Toxie poster. I was like, "Oh, this guy's like a cool dude." Like, because I met Tom Savini. Bad time. It was. I'm not gonna say.
You have to catch him in a good mood. We've had,
I just walked out. Hey, Mr. Savini. He went. I went, holy shit! What did I do to you? But
he was like, oh, look at this guy coming in here.
My heart, as like 19-year-old me, I went, oh, Tom Savini hates me. I was like, damn,
yeah.
But like, how did you get involved with Trauma? And I know Alex will probably want to ask you some Trauma questions too. Alex is like very big into Trauma. But how did you first get involved?
I was working at a video store in Hell's Kitchen for a couple of years, and was kind of just like looking for something else. I remember I hadn't really paid attention to Trauma since like 1986. The first videos I rented at a video store, which is actually a camera store, in where I grew up, Wolf Camera. The first 2 videos I rented by myself was Toxic Avenger and Clockwork Orange when I was like 7 years old. And
great picks. That's quite the double feature.
And then never really paid attention to Trauma until I was in college, and I used to read. They used to have these Video Hound guides There were before IMDb or anything, the only place you could look up all the movies that were like out was this thing called Video Hound. It was this huge tome that came out every year, and it would listed every single movie that was out. And I used to just sit. While I was in college, I worked at the library. I used to just sit and just like read it. And I came across Sergeant Kabuki Man that way, and I was like, this movie sounds crazy. So I had to go to find it. My roommate and I I went to school in Sarasota, Florida at Ringling School of Art and Design. And then we drove to Orlando to MegaCon, and Lloyd was there. This was like 1998 or something. Lloyd was there at his booth, and he sold me a copy of Sergeant Kabuki Man on VHS. And that circulated amongst my friends at college. I think I had it in my room for like a week, and then after that, I didn't see it again for like 2 years. It just circulated amongst everybody. But after that, didn't really pay attention to Trauma until 2005 or so, and I was just like, I think someone brought in Make Your Own Damn Movie DVD box set, and what would happen is Virgin Megastore was like 2 blocks away. We would get people that would steal a bunch of DVDs from Virgin Megastore, come to us and sell them to us, and we'd buy them at like $5 a pop, and then sell them at the store.
Hell yeah.
But stuff we liked, we would just keep. And I remember they brought in Make Your Own Damn Movie, which is like the 5-disc box set. And I was like, oh yeah, this is kind of interesting. So I used to work the overnights from 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. And I just watch stuff on TV there. So I just had it in, just ran through all the stuff, and I was like, really, getting back into the sort of indie, make your own damn movie type of thing. And I was like, oh, the whole time I've been here, the Trauma offices were 2 blocks from where I worked.
What?
And so I went online, and I just literally applied for. They were looking for a graphic designer, so I applied to be a graphic designer. Got an interview. Ended up they had just moved to Long Island City from Manhattan. So what I thought was going to be like, oh, I'm just going to right after work, I'll just jump 2 blocks over to the building. They actually moved like 2 subway stops, like 2 subway train transfers away, and from Manhattan to Long Island City, which is like Queens. And but I didn't get hired as a graphic designer, but they were like, hey, if you want to intern, you can intern. So I was like, yeah, why not? So I did interns during the day at Trauma, and then worked nights at the video store. And inevitably, like everything happens at Trauma, they fired somebody, and then since I was there a month, which was a long time for an intern. And then I had also found the behind the scenes high tape that had the footage of them blowing up the fast food restaurant from Poultrygeist at the end. They were yeah, so they were just doing the theatrical run of Poultrygeist when I was there. And so they were working on putting together the DVD, and they couldn't find this tape that had the behind the scenes of this explosion, and it happened to just be sitting behind the editor like the whole time on like right on the shelf. And for some reason, no one. And I was just like in there one day, and I just looked, and I was like, "Is that the tape?" And so Lloyd was so happy that I found it that they hired me to replace this person they fired, and I just started working there in their basically the head of Trauma Team Video, which is like distribution mostly. So I did all the sales and distribution stuff for Trauma, and came up, did the DVDs and eventually Blu-rays. But yeah, I mean, you learn everything if you want to. I mean, you have to really, you can learn so much because they don't teach you anything really, so you have to like learn it. And by that point, there was no old guard. Like, before that, when Trauma was still in Hell's Kitchen, you had people that had been there for like 4 years or 6 years or something, and they could be like, well, we've been here so long, this is what you need to know. The time I started working there was nobody there that was like an old guard. So no one knew anything. No one knew how to do anything at any job, basically. So you just had to do it, and if you stuck it out for more than like 6 months, you were there for forever, basically, because there
Wow.
was just like, all right, you're not going to quit because of everything, the craziness of this job. So you're in it for the long haul. And if you're willing to like sit there and like learn how to do distribution, learn how to talk to buyers, learn what sells, what doesn't sell, learn how to talk to manufacturers for the DVDs, and what you need for that goes into making DVD menus, and what Lloyd likes to just acquire every movie, everybody that comes up to him at a convention, and then you got to say like, well, a lot of these are crap, so we can't put everything out on DVD. So you have to sort of just like you know go through and you learn bits and pieces, and that luckily a lot of that has been able to use after the fact, and it just builds a foundation of like if you have an end goal, you use it, you can use it as a good foundation to start focusing on how it's going to work outside of this out of the box environment.
That's awesome.
That's so cool.
Cool to like hear like where you started, where you were, how you got to where you're at now, right? Like it's always interesting for me at least to hear that like these stories, because like you never know. And like with movie making and the industry itself, I think there's a grand illusion that people have that it's like, oh, movies are just made. Like what do you mean? Like they're just made. It's more than that. And this is like talking to you is obvious proof that even luckily horror itself right now is being more regarded. It's people are loving it. With Terrifier 3 shocked everybody with how well it did. Thus now
Right.
we have the new Toxic Avenger actually come.
Yeah.
So it's cool to see the love still be there. I had a few more questions. Maybe the guys do as well. I want my last few. What do you currently think? And I might throw a Warhammer one in at the very end. What do you currently think of the state of horror movies and movies in general, and the state of streaming?
Well, I mean, it's I think that there's a big issue with state of movies in general right now, um, and it's all the sort of the industry's fault for shooting itself in the foot when they got rid of physical media. I think streaming it was a short game. It's a stock market game. Them, they thought that an industry that has so many different diverse avenues to it, and it functions and factions and affects so many people, can be run like an internet company with like 50 people in one room all on laptops. That's not what the industry is. And by trying to just sort of present revenue to financiers in order to gain higher valuation on their studios, they've destroyed like basically the fundamental backbone of why they were profitable in the first place. Because when you had a physical media since the 80s, you had a whole industry based around that physical media, and then you had profit from that physical media. You had even guaranteed profits. Certain stores were going to buy at least X number of units of something. I mean, even when I was at Stroma when the decline and the rapid drop off happened, and I witnessed it firsthand with conversations with Netflix and video retailers, and when we were trying to sell it. So when I perfect example is when I first started, we could go to a video store chain, and they would be like, we're going to take 20,000 copies of this movie, put it across all our stores. And we'd be like, great, that's going to pay. We know that's coming in. That pays for X amount. We know Best Buy is going to take X amount of copies. They may return some, but we know we know we can press this amount because Best Buy is going to take this amount. And then that all factored into, all right, what's the budget of the movie? Well, we know we're going to sell X, Y, and Z to these companies off the cuff, so we can account for that as coming back to us relatively quickly after DVD. And that's as those places disappeared, that guarantee disappeared. And then all of a sudden, you're not making any money from physical media at all. And then all of a sudden, you're like, okay, well, how do I make money for streaming? But you don't, because Netflix comes in. And at first, we made a deal for like 100 movies on Netflix, and they paid us, pretty good fee per title. But that was a one-time fee. So once that's done, and then what happens is once Netflix went to all these independent studios like Troma and Blue Underground and everything, we're going to take your entire library, we're going to put it up. What happened is they took that and went to MGM and said, we have 10,000 titles on our server, come join us. And then MGM said, okay, you have all these titles, you have a back catalog, great. We'll give you some titles. We're going to want, this premium valuation on Rocky and all that stuff. And Netflix was like, great. Then they got rid of all their independent guys that they used to bolster their numbers, because they don't need to pay for Toxic Avenger anymore, because they have Rocky and they have Star Trek and everything now.
I can still hear you. I just have to run out there. I can still hear you.
So that they get rid of all the independent guys, and then so all of a sudden now independent guys can't make any money anywhere, right? They there's just nowhere that's going to pay a physical media type of fee where the more you sell, the more money you make. Everything is a flat fee from a streamer, and a very low flat fee. And then that's just like, keep streaming. You could do some VOD stuff like Amazon or something, but again, that's people are only buying or renting movies that they've heard about, that have been in theaters, or that have some sort of name to them. And so you get you get a decrease in value of the product, because you used to be able to have all these middle tier $2 to $10 million movies that could just make their budget back on DVD, or or even Blu-ray. So you had all those great action movies that came out just on VHS that were $5 million, that had stars in them. All of your Van Damme movies and your Dolph Lundgren movies and some of even your Stallone movies and stuff like that were all sort of mid-tier action movies, and that's because they knew the video market would finance them. Now you don't have that. So what do you get? You don't have that quality of movie. And since streamers can't make any real money off of subscribers, because how one guy pays $14 a month at the high end, that's not the same as selling 10,000 DVDs to rental stores and then having another 50 or 100,000 people buy them at Walmart. That revenue stream is just gone. So now you don't have that level of like the $2 to $10 million movies anymore. So that whole industry's gone. So you now either have your big blockbusters, or you have your super sub $1 million movies. So now all the budgets are $400,000, $500,000, or they're 20 to 40 and up $1 million. And only those there, like it has to be a big theatrical movie. We can't take a chance on something that's subtle. It has to have some big theatrical thing to it. And that's what most studios are looking for. And it's just, there's no middle ground anymore, which every industry needs a middle ground. You need, you can't just have like your $5,000 car and your $100,000 car. You need your $10,000 to $20,000 Camry. You need, that's like the backbone of like any industry, is that middle ground. And they got rid of their own middle ground because they were like, oh, we're gonna run this like internet where people are just gonna dump money in it because we're gonna tell them we have revenue, because we're not going to disclose how much we're actually making, because we can't disclose how many subscribers we have. And what everybody's reeling is, oh, we need commercials.
Yeah.
Because that's how we get money. Oh crap. All right, so now we're going to have to charge you more. Yeah, we're going to charge you more money for a month, but we're also going to put commercials in everything.
Which is pissing everybody off.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it should, because that's not what you paid for. Was the cut the cord agreement was, we don't have to put up with commercials and we get all your content. And they're like, well, that was the dream, and we got, now our companies are worth $5 billion, and we get to pay our CEO $27 million bonuses, but we have to pay for that. So we're gonna have to put commercials back and everything. And we're also going to raise the price. So it's you know, I mean, it will probably, you know, like everything, it will eventually even out. I mean, you know, there's been a resurgence in physical media in a sense where, you know, all of a sudden, you know, studios like even AMC is like, you know what, we're going to start putting stuff out on physical media again. We're going to start doing a bigger push on stuff for physical media. You know, there's been, I think even one of the companies is like, oh, we're building new DVD players. You know, we're building like,
Really?
you know, something
It's
like,
coming
yeah. So
back.
it's like, you know, there's a slow, you know, it's not going to obviously be as big. You're not going to see like, you know, big blockbuster chains or anything, but you know, there's physical media stores are actually popping up, you know, a bit. And it's, you know, it's just, and they're busy, and it's just to show that, you know, there's an interest in owning product because people are kind of pissed, like, oh yeah, by the way, you know, we're gonna censor or take out these couple of episodes of South Park when we put it on our streaming channel
Bro,
because
don't even
Oh,
get me
no.
started. That
yeah,
shit pissed me
we're
off.
gonna
We went immediately to the local like disc replay and we're like grabbing all the South Park seasons because
yeah. I mean,
that pisses
I
me off
bought
so
I
bad.
bought all the Looney Tune box sets I could find from the old Looney Tunes because those are gone now. You know, it's just you know, they control it all. You know, people are like, you know, if I own it, I control it. I can watch it whenever I want. Like it's the version I want. You can't do anything to it because it's mine.
Hmm.
You know, I mean, so it's there's a bit of reality check. I think that's you know, some people are waking up to with it. So
I think that's like you're seeing that a lot, and you see it like every time Netflix says like, "Oh, we have to raise the price." I feel like that's another group of people who are like, "I guess we're just gonna do physical now because I don't want to jump through these hoops anymore."
well, yeah, I mean that's the thing. I think cable's going to come back a bit. I think cable needs to, you know, um, you know, they one good sort of media push from cable. I think people might actually swing back because it's just like we had all the choices for less money now. Now it's less money. You know, now and before it was when Netflix was $4.99 a month. You know, and you know we didn't have commercials on things. You know, it was like all right, that's worth it when we only had one streamer we were paying for. But now, in order to get the content you want, you have to subscribe to 4 or 5 different things that are all, you know, $10 or more a month, and then now they're messing with what they want you to see and whatnot.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So you know, it's bad. I mean, all the if the industry followed more of like the video game industry a bit, and they're like video game industry, so like when we came out with NES, games were $60. They've been $60 plus for 40 years
Now be careful though, because
because
we're rising. We're rising over here. It's getting pretty scary.
so
GTA
it's
6 is
like
about to kill us.
yeah, so it's just like, you know, we know that's what it is. People want to play the game. It's $60. We could, you know, the industry did it really well when VHS first came out. They were like, we're gonna sell you a tape. It's the same tape that a regular, you know, a $20 tape is later down the line. We're gonna sell it for $120 because we know there's gonna be a rental industry. Rental stores are gonna buy this tape. Average person's not gonna want to pay $120 per tape. They're gonna rent it. We've created a lot more jobs. We created an industry. We created all kinds of revenue for everybody down the line. They could have kept that going with DVDs. They could have charged $100 a DVD and just added it. Like, here's a better thing to view, but you still have to rent them. But
Because
instead,
you're
Warner
not gonna want
Brothers
to
is
buy it yourself.
yeah. But Warner
Yeah.
Brothers was like, nope, we're gonna charge $20, and then everybody had to follow suit because Warner Brothers was a race to the bottom. And then that's what happened. It was just like, and then basically they could have kept that market going. You know, no one had to say like, you know, hey, let's all sell our libraries to streamers. I mean, they didn't have to do that. They could have just said, we're not going to sell our libraries to streamers. We value the product too much. Let's keep it on physical media and let's keep this sort of, you know, money train coming. But the internet boom was so big, people were just shoveling money into these internet companies, and the word and streaming became like a big, you know, money word. And then people were just like, I just want money for my stocks, you know, and let's devalue everything by putting it online for streaming. And then, you know, unfortunately, we're in the situation now where the industry's unstable, and there is no, you know, they got rid of the middle class of movies.
Well, I'm glad I chose this to pretty much end the episode on. It's like everyone's
Yeah.
like, "This has been cool." Oh shit, it's getting sad. But like,
Well, don't forget
it's true.
Street
though.
Trash is on Screambox, so we can.
That's right.
You can watch Street Trash on Screambox.
A lot of good
So,
stuff on
you know.
Screambox. SB38.
Yeah, code SB38. No, Street Trash was awesome, man. I can't believe because when we first got this the Screambox deal, kind of, hey, you promote us, you get it. All right, cool, got it. I was like, Street Trash. I was like, I saw that there was a remake of sorts, but I had seen the original. Again, my uncle was just a bad influence, and I would always be at my grandma's, and there's always like schlock on the TV and just like wild gore fest movies, and I've always loved it. I've always loved it because I could point at it and be like, "It's not real, Grandma. It's a movie. These are people doing this." She was like, "Yeah, you can watch that, I guess, because you're not like, you get it." So I would just watch it. So we saw Street Trash, and that was like, I believe that was our first episode, right? With Street Trash.
No, Frogman was the first
Frogman,
one.
Frogman was one. Street Trash was two,
Yeah.
and Street Trash was just like, oh man, like I remember like because that was the first time I had seen this street. Just like watching the neck bubbles. And I was like, oh, that's some good classic stuff right there. So I guess my actual last question is, how did if you got to go, please let us know because we could do this for hours. Right. How did Street Trash come to be again?
We did a DVD special edition of Combat Shock when we were at Troma, and one of the interviews we did was with the writer producer of Street Trash, Roy Frumkes, and I sort of stayed in contact with him for years, and I think like 8 years ago we started talking about doing another Street Trash or a sequel or something with it, and it took a very, very long time to sort of find the right path for it. And my my producing partner Justin had a record label that had put out a bunch of Shudder soundtracks, and one of them was Fried Barry, and it was sort of like that's the vibe we wanted. That was like indie, kinetic, just weird vibe. We talked to him about it, and it sort of just all started to come together. And Screambox was just starting up, and we talked. They liked the idea, so they were like, "All right, we'll back you on this." And we were like, "Well, we don't." One of the big things we want to do is we don't want to take anything away from the original. Obviously, we're not trying to replace the original. We're not trying to say this is better than the original. It's not a remake, not a reimagining of the original. The original stands on its own. We want to create something that's like exists in its own universe, in the universe of Street Trash, but on its own. So number one is we're not setting it in New York. Is that too many comparisons? Initially, when I was coming up with like how we can make it different, we were thinking like LA, and this was pre like homeless situation in LA, and the idea was always going to be like, all right, if there was a big like homeless problem, what if the government was using this Viper to melt the homeless away, and they just come in with pressure washers and then just pressure wash the bodies into the sewer, and then they got rid of the homeless problem. And that sort of was the idea that kept running. So eventually when we got Ryan involved from Fried Barry, it was like that was the concept. And he's like, well, I can shoot in South Africa. I live in South Africa. I do all my movies in South Africa. And we're like, well, that's kind of like perfect equivalent of what we're talking about with the disparaging of classes and so forth. So that lent itself to the perfect situation, the perfect location, and also because of the exchange rate and just the resources that he was able to get, became a much bigger movie. We would never be able to get military trucks and all kinds of stuff in the US, but he had the connections, and the budget went a lot further there, so we were able to get all that and make basically the last half of the movie is an action movie.
Yeah.
Because of that, because we were able to really expand upon it. Wow. And we shot, and we made the choice to shoot it on 35. So, we wanted to sort of make it a film, so we made it a whole a whole film with all the ups and downs of that, because South Africa, Kodak got rid of its processing center in South Africa, so we had to ship all the reels to the UK to get them developed, while they're shooting. So
Anxiety.
it was a whole thing. But we did it, and it's still. I mean, it just played in theaters in Idaho last weekend. So it's been doing like a year-long theatrical run with sometimes coupled with the original, because we sort of control both with for theatrical, and we like to couple them together and put them out there. And so we do, still making its rounds, which is great. And people that have seen the original Streettrash, I would say it's probably like a, honestly, maybe like a 60-40 on that they like it. A lot of the other are very like, this isn't the original.
Oh my God.
This is not.
Yeah.
So you're always going to get those. Yeah. But people who haven't seen the original tend to really like the new one, because it's it's a very on the nose sort of political stance on things. I mean,
we felt that watching it. We were like,
yeah.
Oh yeah.
So it's yeah. I mean, we're happy, very happy with it, with what Ryan did with the budget he had on it. Unfortunately, one of the main actors, the Stanley Kubrick actor, just passed away yesterday, I think.
Oh no!
As of June 11th. So I don't know when this will air, but yeah. So unfortunately, that was a big hit for us. But everybody loves him, a chef in Streettrash.
Yeah.
So
love chef.
But yeah. So it's we're excited, and we had an idea to just basically continue various Streettrashes in various countries with different directors, and each culture and country has its sort of take on this idea. So and we've already had people approach us from other countries about this idea. So it could be kind of interesting to have all these different versions, takes, and viewpoints on this sort of class warfare idea with the sort of a Streettrash background.
I really liked the aspect of it, because I think some other like movies have done it before, where it'll be like the original will happen in one part of the world, and then they'll show it from a completely different part of the world. I didn't know a whole lot about the original, but I thought it was really cool when I found out that it was in New York. And at the time, I didn't really know like how it got to South Africa. Like, oh, that's a lot of what we're just now learning. So I'm like, it kind of gives the idea like, oh, this is happening everywhere, independently of whatever's happening.
I mean,
in other parts of the world.
Exactly. So that's kind of the idea, is that we're putting something together that hopefully that will happen, where it's we want what is the Japanese version of Streettrash, what is the Indian version of Streettrash,
dude, more Sockle. We saw that puppet, and I went, I need this like on my shelf. I need it on my shelf.
We gotta get a plushie of Sockle made.
Oh, dude, I would explode if that was.
If we get 10,000 people that want a Sockle plushie, we'll do the Sockle plushie.
We need to like boost this, because
I'll buy at least 3, so that should get the ball rolling.
I got 4. Alex, what? 5 maybe?
Yeah, 4 or 5. Let's go.
Right, cool. So we're getting there, dude.
Getting there.
We need a showing in Detroit. Like, that needs to happen.
We team with Vinegar Syndrome on our theatrical, because they preserve the prints and whatnot. But send me get some Detroit theaters on board. What's the indie theater? Hopefully they can show 35, but
we still got drive-ins too.
I'll have to show it on drive-in.
I'm gonna hit.
That'd be sweet.
Yeah.
I got it. I'm gonna talk to Ford, Wyoming. That would be nuts. People would go.
We'd love to do it,
especially if you coupled it with the original Streettrash.
Show both. Yeah,
because they do double features. I mean, when the new Evil Dead came out, both times when I saw Evil Dead at the drive-in, they coupled it with the original Evil Dead. So it was just a wild ride. Like I got to see
Great.
Evil Dead on the drive-in. It's awesome.
Excellent.
Man, I appreciate you hopping on the show. This has been an awesome hour, an hour and a half almost. We really appreciate you being here. Is there anything else
It's
that
been great.
you wanted to plug for yourself? Is there anything you're working on you want to tell anybody about, or is just anything you want anybody to know before we log off?
Let's see. When will this air?
Friday, this Friday.
Let's see. I would say, obviously keep a lookout for our, going to be an amazing Halloween special that's coming up for Last Drive-In. Going to blow everybody's mind. And then obviously our Christmas special after that. But the Halloween one's going to be something crazy. We have some stuff coming out. Can't really talk about it yet, just because we have, MC has to make the official announcement for that stuff. Yeah, I mean, we're just happy that we're able to sort of, keep going, get our niche, in stuff, and we're busy, so that's good. We're happy with the fans, still sticking with us for the Last Drive-In. I mean, we appreciate them all. I mean, that they're the reason why we're still doing it. The controversies of the movie titles and the cheering of the Joe Bob jokes and everything is what makes it really fun to do. So that's why we really like it. But anything else, it's yeah, I mean, it's just industry wise, it sucks, but
we're making the best of it.
Yeah, so I mean, hopefully, something can turn around a little bit, but we'll see what happens. Yeah, nothing really else going on other than let's do a deep dive into the horse heresy.
Where do you want to
let's
start?
see.
Where do you want to start? Erebus is a dick, first and foremost, and poor Magnus. Anyways, we can talk after the show. We can talk after. Magnus, he did a lot wrong. He should have listened to his dad. That is what it is. But also the Emperor's. Go buy physical media. Go check out Streettrash. Go check out Black Eyed Swan. Alex is holding Return to Nukem High right there.
Black Eyed Susan just came out.
Susan. I had Black Swan and Black Eyed Susan mixed in my head.
The Vinegar Syndrome just put out Eight Eyes, which we did in Serbia. Black Eyed Susan.
Yes.
Scooter McRae's great movie. Obviously, Streettrash available through Vinegar Syndrome. If you're in Brooklyn, check out Night Owl Video, which is a great physical media store in Brooklyn. They have used VHS. They have a great selection of VHS, but they get all the new stuff too from all the distributors. If you want to just browse, they got laser discs, they got everything. So check them out. They're great. And then just keep an eye on Shudder for the newest Joe Bob episodes that are coming out. And there should be some really great announcements coming up.
Very excited. Oh yeah. Thanks again, Matt Manjourides, for hopping on. It's been great talking.
Yeah, no, it's been great. I appreciate it.
It was awesome. Thanks for chatting with us.
It's been awesome.
Yeah, no problem.
If you guys ever have him on the show, make sure you get Black Eyed Susan correct. Don't call it Black Eyed Swan because your brain moves too fast. All right, guys. Until next week, take it easy and be safe. And thank you all for listening.